The senior senator from Mississippi.
Thank you, Mr. President. The senator from South Dakota has said it well, and I just want to come down here today to echo that we've had so many misstatements made by people on the other side of the aisle this afternoon and this evening. I just think it cries out for explanations. Senator Thune is correct. This is a bipartisan bill that we're asking for consideration on, and we're asking that a vote be taken so that we can have the final 30 hours of debate and get to it tomorrow. America's crying out for this. The financial markets are watching us, and our economy is teetering on the brink. We need to get this done. I, too, was in one of the working groups, Mr. President, and we had equal numbers of Democratic and Republican senators in this working group with their staffs, with their laptops, and much of what is in the bill was hammered out with the input of Democratic and Republican members of this working group. And there were a few issues, yes, that we couldn't resolve, and so we kicked it up to the Democratic leader and the majority leader to be hammered out, perhaps in consultation with the administration. But far and away, most of this legislation is bipartisan in nature, and it just pains me for somehow the accusation to be made that this is nothing but a partisan bill written by the Republican leader. What is this about? The American people need to understand this, Mr. President. This is about getting money to average workers so that they can pay their bills and so that they can stay employed. It involves enhanced and lengthened unemployment insurance, and it is a provision given to us and designed and conceived by our Democratic friends. We felt it was worth doing, and we put it in the bill. Also, there is, as the distinguished gentleman from South Dakota said, there is $350 billion to small businesses to keep workers from ever being unemployed in the first place, to keep them on the job. So small businesses will have an opportunity to receive a cash infusion, and this could happen as early as this coming week. And they would be able to use this money to pay the salaries, and those people would never have to go on unemployment insurance because they would still be on the job. That's what's in this bill. That's what we need to get to a conclusion about and send on over to the House of Representatives tomorrow morning. It, of course, involves checks from the government, massive checks, a massive amount of checks to middle-income Americans to just give them a little something in their accounts so that they can pay the bills in response to this economic downturn that we've had. And then it involves loans to keep Americans working. And this is something that I in particular was working on with my Republican colleagues and with Democrats on this working group. The airline business in this country is about to shut down. Passenger rates are single digits. They can't stay afloat with this. And so it pains me to hear our solution to this problem, to keep airline workers working. It pains me to hear this described by my Democratic friends as a bailout. That's what would happen if we were just going to hand over cash to the airlines to keep them afloat. But that's not what we're doing. What we're doing is offering to pay loans, quick loans, to the airline companies so that they can continue to pay their employees and keep them on the job and not put them on the unemployment rolls. These loans would be made at market rates. There would be no loan forgiveness, and they must be paid back. Not a grant, not a bailout. It's just offensive to me to hear some of my friends that perhaps have not read the bill and are not as thoroughly versed on its provisions as we are that actually wrote the bill, to describe this as a bailout for corporate America. Nothing could be further from the truth. There were some people asking us to make grants to the big airline companies. We rejected that on a bipartisan basis, Mr. President, and said, no, these must be loans. Once the airlines get back on their feet and once this coronavirus outbreak has subsided, they'll be in good shape again. And they'll be able to pay it back with market interest rates, just like any other business that has to take out a loan. But we've got to get this money to them in a hurry. And so I just object and have to come down here and say that perhaps they're confused, perhaps they haven't read the bill as I have, but it makes available loans to the airline industry and to other related industries that are critical to national security. If I might, Mr. President, let me just read a sentence or two from the bill itself. This is bill language that I'm quoting. The Secretary may enter into agreements to make loans or loan guarantees to one or more eligible businesses. The applicant must be a business for which credit is not reasonably available. They can go out and borrow money from banks. This doesn't apply to them. But our airlines are going to need more money than that, and so this says that they must be paid back. The loan or loan guarantee must be sufficiently secured. Again, I'm reading from bill language. The duration of the loan or loan guarantee is as short as practicable. Now, my friend from Illinois, I appreciate the tone that he and my friend from Ohio used in their exchange just a few moments ago. And I do think there's a real possibility that minds of goodwill can come to an agreement tonight. The realities on the ground out in our country demand that and cry out for it. But again, I must take issue with my friend from Illinois saying that there were no restrictions on the loans that we're giving to the airline industries that we're going to allow the Secretary of the Treasury to give. And he mentioned specifically we need to prohibit stock buybacks. If these airline companies are going to get these loans, we need to have a provision in the law that prohibits stock buybacks. As a matter of fact, Mr. President, that is in the bill that we wanted to take up and we were unable to get a vote on, unable to get the requisite number of votes just an hour or so ago. We prohibit in the bill loans from being used by the company to buy back their stock. Here's bill language. Subparagraph E, except to the extent required under a contractual obligation in effect as the date of the enactment of this act, the agreement prohibits the eligible business from repurchasing any outstanding equity interest while the loan or loan guarantee is outstanding. So no corporate buybacks. We have answered one of the concerns that the Democratic whip mentioned in his remarks. None of this money can go to increase executive salaries. It must be repaid, and it must be repaid with interest. Our bill has explicit prohibitions against any loan forgiveness for any of the loans in this entire section. This is hardly a bailout, Mr. President. We are offering a lifeline. Again, this bipartisan language, hammered out by Republicans and Democrats, offers a lifeline to critical companies who would probably not survive, and we do it by providing carefully crafted and restricted loans to protect the taxpayers. Without these loans being available in the very next few days, some of these companies will file bankruptcy. Many thousands of these employees will lose their jobs. And we are trying to pass this bill to keep that from happening. 128,000 workers in one company 92,000 workers in another company, 79,000 workers in yet another. And so I would just say to my friends, let's negotiate these last few details and get this done. But don't misrepresent this as a big giveaway to corporate America. This is designed to help average Americans who are suffering and threatening the loss of their jobs. Now, the majority whip mentioned the appropriations portion of this. And again, this is money that's needed. Americans need to know what is in the discretionary appropriated part of this bill. And so let me just tell you, more than 75% of it, $186 billion of the total, will go to state and local governments to help them get over over the hump in this terrible crisis. I've been contacted by officials from state and local government, and I told them that this bill has $186 billion to help them get through this crisis. I thought I was going to be able to tell them that this would be enacted in the next day or two. Unfortunately, I was a little over-optimistic on that. But $186 billion for state and local government, $75 billion for hospitals. Clearly they need it. $20 billion for the Veterans Administration, $11 billion for vaccines, therapeutic, diagnostics, and other preparedness needs. Now, if there are larger needs, come and tell us that, and we'll work with people. But this is a generous bill, $4.5 billion for the Centers for Disease Control, $1.7 billion for the Strategic National Stockpile, $12 billion to assist the military in addressing this coronavirus, $12 billion for K through 12 education, $6 billion for higher education, $5 billion for FEMA disaster relief funds. There's $10 billion in it for airports. My colleagues have heard from airports, and $20 billion for public transportation. This is an injection of appropriated money to keep this economy going until this virus subsides. It is an injection of loan money to some large businesses and an opportunity also for the Federal Reserve, within their discretion under a program that's been established for decades and decades, to loan money not only to big companies, but medium-sized companies and small companies under a Federal Reserve program commonly known as Section 13, subparagraph 3. So I would just say to my colleagues, Mr. President, before we come down here and make inaccurate statements, read the bill. Understand what we're doing. Understand that this is to get money to workers who need to stay on the job. This is a bill to get unemployment benefits to workers who are already off the job, and an injection of cash into our economy, and a prop up on a loan basis with interest to be repaid to keep the airlines and related businesses afloat. I hope we pass it. I know Americans are hoping and praying for this tonight, and perhaps by the early light of morning, we'll have good news on this. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.